who we are authentically, how we live our life, and how we show up every single day is basically messages that we give to every single strand of DNA in our body. And if we live it unconsciously through a part of our brain and nervous system that's on fear and survival mode in our ego space, constantly looking at stress, we're basically sending messages of danger to every single cell that drives inflammation, that lowers our immune system, that puts us prone to poor performance, chronic symptoms, and chronic disease. If we start to do the work of making conscious decisions about how we want to live our life, and most importantly, living life as the truest expression of us through love, through passion, through authenticity, we give ourselves the signals of love and safety, which allow growth and healing, which is why you are your best medicine.
Well, Dr. Kien Vuu, welcome to Passion, Love, Pursuit podcast, or other word to call you is Dr. V as known. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me, Erica.
Absolutely. So I actually just want to kick off this episode with one statement that you boldly say, which I think is the foundation of everything you teach. And that is that you are your best medicine. And I believe this to be so, so true. But I want to know what this means to you and why do you say this?
Wow, this is going to take more of the entire podcast to fully deconstruct it. But at the end of the day, who we are authentically, how we live our life, and how we show up every single day is basically messages that we give to every single strand of DNA in our body. And if we live it unconsciously through a part of our brain and nervous system that's on fear and survival mode in our ego space, constantly looking at stress, we're basically sending messages of danger to every single cell that drives inflammation, that lowers our immune system, that puts us prone to poor performance, chronic symptoms, and chronic disease. If we start to do the work of making conscious decisions about how we want to live our life, and most importantly, living life as the truest expression of us through love, through passion, through authenticity, we give the cells the safety of, we give ourselves the signals of love and safety, which allow growth and healing, which is why you are your best medicine.
Oh, so good. And we're going to unpack this a lot in this episode today, but I love that messaging. This is exactly what I share to my audience as well, like how essential it is to know and to be and embody ourselves, to not wear all these masks and to be out of alignment with who we truly are. And that causes dis-ease in the body. So we're going to unpack this a lot more. And that's what I think is so special about the messages you share is you talk about the true essence of the connection of that and what that sends to our cells. And then and then could either prevent disease or bring on new diseases. So I would love to just go back to your story because you have a really, really incredible, powerful story that really brings you to what you do today. And being, your career as a triple board practitioner, and then now leading into longevity and performance and what you speak about today, I would love to know what brought you here today.
Well, I mean, it was an accident. 8 years ago, I was a practicing interventional radiologist, so a doctor that uses medical imaging to perform minimally invasive surgeries. But I found myself overweight, diabetic, had high blood pressure on prescription medications. Here's a doctor who's been trained at the National Institutes of Health, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, with disease. And it was basically through the work of uncovering why I got disease. And so much of it boiled down to my childhood and how I was raised. And so let me break that down a little bit further. When I was an interventional radiologist and got disease, I knew I had to change something. And so I looked at longevity medicine, biohacking, regenerative medicine. I did an additional fellowship in that. And so I learned hormones, optimization techniques, peptides, stem cells, exosomes, all these new things. But primarily I worked on my lifestyle. And I started to notice changes in my body already. Well, as I started to do some of the deeper work, I was like, whoa, what had driven me to live the way I lived? And it took me back to my childhood. I wasn't born here. I was actually born in post-war Vietnam. And when I was just a couple months old, my parents actually had to take me. We escaped on a refugee boat filled with 2,000 other refugees. We spent 8 months on the boat. I was the only infant to survive, another 3 months in a Philippine refugee camp. And then we were sponsored to America by a Catholic church. And one would think, wow, you would be so grateful as a kid to have survived that. But that wasn't the case. I remember growing up, I watched TV, I would go to school, and I was just constantly being teased, whether it's the holes in my hand-me-down clothes or the food my mom sent me to school with. I got a lot of that. Go back to your home country, chinky. Got a lot of that. And so growing up, I constantly felt the feeling of I'm not enough. I'm not worthy, not American enough, not white enough, not tall enough, not rich enough. And there was this why me mentality. And I didn't realize that, but that was the programming and that was the mental state that I was in. And throughout my life, it was all adapting to things that I think would make me worthy, achieve success, become valedictorian, go to the best medical schools, go to the best residency programs. And I was constantly chasing that under the narrative of I'm not worthy, I'm not enough. And so what was I making but unconscious choices in sleeping, in moving, in what I put in my body? I was making unconscious choices about the emotional state I was in, where I spent my mind and focus, my relationships with people. They weren't really relationships. It was like, how do I get more ahead with you in my life or not? Otherwise, you were out. And it was all about me, rather than serving, rather than recognizing that I was a part of something bigger. And those unconscious choices came from that ego space. And what we now know is there's a part of our brain and human nervous system. So being human beings, we all have this thing called the default mode network. And at a very early age, it's something that we learn to help us be alive. So it learns things from our parents, from our teachers, from society, from media, worldviews, values, belief systems. It teaches us how the world works, where we fit in the world. But it's constantly looking for what can hurt us. And so I'll remember our past traumas, so people who have a lot of trauma growing up as a kid, divorce, drugs, neglect, abuse in the family, or simply not being seen or not being heard. Then we start to develop these adaptive behaviors for us to receive safety and love and connection. For me, it was achieving success. For other people, it might be people pleasing. It might be aggression. It might be avoidance. All these masks that we wear that are not us. And that's how we go through life. And wearing those masks means that there's danger around. And that's the signals we're constantly giving to our body. So even with all the conventional medical training I had, I was making unconscious choices because I was living through this mask and I saw the world as being dangerous. And it wasn't until I saw the program as, oh, wow, this mask thinks I'm not enough and not worthy. And that's why I'm making these choices. And the more and more you can see that, and the more and more you could see that is not you and not the authentic you, you could start to say, what is me? What are the things that bring me joy? What are the things that light me up? What inspires me? And you start to do more of those things. All of a sudden, at that point, you start to notice the shift in the energy of your body. And your energy and your emotions are so important because it is a lens to the biochemical symphony that's going inside your biology. And so to answer your question, becoming conscious of the choices that I was making on how I showed up every single moment started to shift. And this is how somebody who was a conventionally trained doctor started to state that personal development, spirituality, remembering who we are is one of our best medicines.
Oh, so good. So much to unpack with that. I love what you share, first of all, because there's one thing I share is that even Tony Robbins, which I'm sure you know of, Tony Robbins talks about like the powerful force of our identity. And that's kind of what you're talking about, is this unconscious programming, like this identity we formed about ourselves. And that could be just, like you said, wearing these masks. And so we operate unconsciously wearing these masks, and then it becomes a part of who we are. And so there's no way to shift into a new identity unless we are able to like bring the awareness and then remove these masks and really uncover who are we really, and then be able to cast a vision of that identity we do want to have for ourselves. So I would love to hear, because going from where you were when you were in the hospital and taking care of patients, and then you were having health issues, what was like the catalyst to then discover a new way and discover what you're talking about right now, that it was actually not just getting your diet dialed in, not just getting your, fitness dialed in. It was much deeper than that. So how did you uncover that? Because I think a lot of people listening to your story, they can relate to it, meaning all of us have worn masks, all of us have triggers, all of us had some sort of trauma that has led us this path to keep us putting these protective mechanisms to keep us safe. So what did you do to uncover really what was behind the veil of what was causing your disease and the problems in your health?
Well, I think you just follow the clues in life that bring things into you. And for me, it was, a year that rocked me. And every time you think that something bad is happening to you, the universe is almost giving you a gift for you to discover who you really are underneath. And I remember that same year I was given a chronic disease diagnosis. There was a woman that I thought I was going to marry, but because I didn't pay any attention to her, because I was so worried about success for me, that she left me for another man. I also lost a close uncle to cancer, and I also, tore a labrum in my shoulder, and I was told I might not be able to operate anymore. So everything in my world was like, oh my God, you might as well not live. Like everything's going to kaputs. And it was really, okay, well, you got to do something new and different. And so I did an anti-aging and longevity medicine fellowship. And then I was in the biohacking world. And as you start to get into that world, you start to know of people doing work on, with plant medicines. You start to uncover spirituality in the personal development space. And that really starts to brought me into the space of, oh, wow, how are we living our life? Are we awake to life, or have we been living in a program? And so it for me, it's when I was in the longevity and regenerative medicine world, I just shifted my diet, sleep, and nutrition first of all, and then I just noted a shift in my body almost immediately, and that was great. And I continue to do that stuff. And the more I started to get in the personal development and spirituality space, I started to notice that my clients that are CEOs, athletes, and things of that nature, they started to notice a change with the new science and longevity. But where I found the hugest shift in people was the pain and the stress that it took on their lives, living a life that's inauthentic with them. And as I started to shift that within myself, I started to notice that the techniques that I was bringing to them to allow them to awaken really started to free up this negative emotional triggers that they have approaching life. And if you're approaching life that way, or if you're feeling like life is a struggle, if you're feeling anxiety, stress, worry over your bank account, over not getting the promotion, or all these things, that's an indicator to your cells that there's danger out there. And it was the work that I was doing to uncover some of those things that revealed that maybe life isn't so dangerous. Maybe life is a gift, and that each moment we're breathing is entirely a gift. And each struggle and each challenge that we get thrown into is a gift for us to be able to see where we can get stronger, be more resilient, and to remember the beauty of who we are.
Mm. I think so many people are so good at doing things, but we're less often just being in the world and doing the things we love. Talk about doing is really more being present in the things we love.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what people need to really shift into. But how do they? I know I was, as I was talking about offline last year, I started to recognize that I wasn't even, I knew I was stressed, but I started to not really think I was stressed because I was so used to it. And I
Yeah.
started operating that way, and I was doing all the things and, going after all the things, needing to check all the boxes. And then I noticed that I started to have a health issue arise, and I'm already dialed in with my nutrition, all these things. But the one thing that I was letting take over me was the stress, the everyday stresses of all these doing things. And also my environment was affecting me. And so I started to address my health issues at the top of the year, but it made me come to the realization of how much stress affects you, and in multiple ways. I mean, stress in general affects how you digest food. You're in this fight or flight mode all the time, and you're not in rest and digest, and that alone could cause a host of issues. So I think it's important to recognize when we aren't living as in alignment with what we see as living our truest, most authentic, vibrant life. Like, there are signs, and I love that you bring up the clues that you were getting. And I think that's so true, is just being able to recognize that. And so how could people begin to, like, at this moment, as they're listening to this conversation, how could we take inventory and really check in and notice and not ignore, like, hey, like I mentioned, I was stressed, but I hardly realized it because I was so used to it. How do we
Yeah.
take inventory and get realigned to what is true to us and what do we need to nourish ourselves?
Such a great question. And I love the word you inventory, because when I wrote my book Thrive State, I wanted to create a blueprint that people could follow, because I truly do feel is if people can really audit and take inventory in their life in terms of the choices they're making in each one of these categories, their ability to get sick is going to be very difficult. Yes, doctors can help. I think, there are going to be infections and toxins and things like that doctors can help you out of, but so much of it, the toxins, is just the choices that we're making in life. And so, I want to make a quick analogy, and then I'll go to the categories people can audit. But if you consider your body, and your body has a fixed amount of energy, of ATP, that's going on inside your body right now. And so when you are in a stress state, basically every single cell goes, man, there's danger. We've got to rev up and get ready for danger. So all the ATP is getting consumed for fighting off danger. And what it does to our body is it raises inflammation. Why? Because back in the prehistoric days, if you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, what if you got a flesh wound? You need inflammation there to protect that. And then it'll also drop your immune system. Why? Because you only have a fixed amount of energy. So why protect against cancer or fighting an infection when you're going to be someone's lunch? And so that's what you're diverting all your body's energy towards when you are in chronic stress, rather than growth and healing and for performance, for our human potential. That's on the opposite side of that. And so when you have suboptimal cells, they lead to suboptimal tissues, suboptimal organs, suboptimal systems. And when those things break down, you get chronic symptoms, brain fog, being overweight, aches and pains, bloating, all these symptoms. And then it can get down to getting chronic disease. So, but on the opposite side of that, if you take stress out of the system, then optimal cells lead to optimal systems, which will give us optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. So that's the other side of the coin there. And so the choices that we make in our life either tells our body we are in a stress state or whether we are safe, loved, and connected. And so here are the 7 categories that people should be asking themselves how they are living their life. And this is something you could take inventory and audit your life. First is going to be physical. And those are 3 things in the physical space, which is basically our sleep, our nutrition, and our movement. Are we getting adequate sleep? Are we eating whole foods? Are we moving every single day? What are the choices that you're making in those spaces? If you're not doing it, what are the stories that are keeping you from not sleeping, from not moving, from not eating the right things? Because that's coming from that old default survival mode that's keeping you from doing that. And then next, other than physical, is going to be your emotions. Your emotions, again, are a gauge to our body and our cells that either we're in danger or whether we're safe. So they're just clues to our body. So when you're starting to feel anxiety, worry, stress, anger, it's clues that something's going on. Is it a subconscious program that just got triggered? Am I really in danger? What's this thing telling me? So emotions, our thoughts, what we focus on, we feel. Are you focused on the things you have versus the things you can't have? You focus on things you can do or not. That focus will change the way you feel. And like I said, that feeling changes our biochemistry and the messages we're giving to ourselves. Next is social, which is our community. Are we in relationship with people that elevate us, that puts us in more positive states? Because we are meant to connect. We have oxytocin for a reason, because we are meant to elevate each other. And when we connect, when we hug, when we embrace, when we help each other up, oxytocin goes up, and we need oxytocin to thrive. And the last piece is spiritual, which is really, some people talk about purpose and it becomes something where it's so big, like I got to think of some grandiose thing. And I don't think it's that at all. I think everybody is meant to be here just as themselves. So whoever you are, your talents, those things are going to light you up. Those things are going to bring you joy. Those things are going to inspire you. And so when you are just the most authentic version of you, that's the gift. That's the gift. Your purpose is you, just to be as you. And if you just share you, knowing that you're connected to something much, much bigger, that's your purpose. And so basically, those are the things you could audit throughout your life right now to know, hey, okay, what are the choices that I'm making here? And if you're not feeling good, if you've got symptoms, I suggest you look at each one of those categories. And as you start to change some of those old habits that are bringing your energy down to lifting you up, you'll start to notice a change in your body, and I bet your symptoms will go away as well.
So good. It's so interesting because I feel like sometimes people have to get to this breaking point where they're like, oh shit, now I need to focus on my health. Maybe I need to eat better now. Maybe I need to move my body now because, let's say they got cancer, and I don't want people to have to get to this breaking point to literally take ownership of their health and increase their longevity. And so I think, as we kind of touched on early on, we talked about your old programming and how you didn't feel enough. And I think all of us don't feel enough in some way. And we feel like we have to compensate in ways to feel more enough or accepted or loved. So what would you, besides like taking inventory and kind of like peeling the layers, like, why am I creating this story? Where would you guide somebody today? Because we can't change the past of the stories that brought us here, but we could now map out our future and create this new identity, if you want to say, of who we want to become. What would you say is something we could do to kind of, like, as you said, you went on this path to realize that you weren't living in alignment with your authentic self. If somebody doesn't even know who they are, how do they then live in alignment with their authentic self? What would you say to them today?
Okay. So many different things to unpack there. Geez.
Yeah.
But let's unpack one thing. We'll see if like other things kind of come into play. One of the
Yeah.
best exercises for people to remember who they are is a bucket list. Why a bucket list? Well, a bucket list, I encourage people to create a bucket list where they just write out whatever they want to achieve, a certain amount of salary a month, the type of promotion they want, their cars or house, so material things, personal goals, where they want to travel, where they want to see their relationships, how do they want to be in intellectually, mentally, physically. Write them all out. Create action items for each one of these things. What will it force you to do? Well, as you start to cross things off, you're going to start to discover the things that just give you a sense of joy and excitement and inspiration just cuz, versus things that you crossed off and go, oh, all right, well, I got 10K a month. That was cool. I didn't really feel anything. Now, if you were solely like ego based, the next it would be like, oh, okay, well, maybe I needed to make 20K a month, down that rabbit hole. But as you start to do this, you'll start to say, there's certain things I hit that it was a nice feeling to have, but it didn't really stay, or it didn't really resonate true for me. And as you start to take more actions, you'll start to recognize the things that truly inspire you, that bring you joy. And those things are as unique to you as your DNA. That's why you
Mm.
were here. And so that is a great way of just starting to remember who you are, because who you are is the entity and the thing, and the things that bring you joy, the things that bring you inspiration, the things that bring you into like the states of aliveness. That's who you are. So you can ask yourself, okay, are the
That.
goals that I'm handling, is how I'm approaching the day leading me to those feelings or not? So that might be, initial step there. And I remember there were a couple things to unpack, but I forgot what they were now. So I'll let you ask the next question.
No, that's okay. And I would love to add to that because I love what you just said. Writing down your bucket list is just like casting your vision, just putting all the things, don't even like think it's silly and that you can't achieve it. I think that's great. I would love to add to that. I call it the joy list, which is similar. The little difference is just like remembering when you feel like lighter and when you feel like alive in something you're doing. For example, myself, walking in nature, being in sunlight, dancing salsa, rock climbing, like, and as I'm prepping for this interview, I was thinking about what are those things? Because I've written my joy list before, and I remember I'm like, okay, I need to schedule this in. Most importantly, because it's so easy to forget those little things that bring us joy because we're doing all the things. And so writing this joy list is like, as you're writing, you're like, oh yeah, that makes me feel like I'm me, like I'm able to like just be present in what I'm doing. And so I love both these exercises kind of work in synergy. And then most importantly, making it part of your schedule. So making like it shows you who you are, and it brings you closer to knowing your authentic self. But yet we need to also put those into our days. Otherwise, we're again just on repeat of doing all these other things that don't bring us joy. Uh, I wanted to talk about, you pretty much answered it because that was the one thing is how do we actually know who we authentically are when we have worn masks for so long protecting ourselves. So that's really, I mean, you really answered it in one simple thing, because I think, when we're so used to being one thing, we are so removed from who we truly are. So how do we come
Yeah,
back?
8
Like
years
it's all
ago, I was
about
like, "What
returning
are the
home.
things that make me happy now?" I don't even know.
Exactly.
You said no to you for so long. You're like, what's the first step? And then it's just
Yeah.
really, doing the things. And I have to say this, that, in a bucket list, it's a lot of doing. But I think in the doing, you're going to find yourself like in these emotions where you're like, "Oh, I feel this. All right." Then you're going to start to notice that you can feel those things without even doing anything. That's the part when you really
Yeah.
start to step into being, when you're like, oh, I know these
Mm.
emotions. I am in a different conscious space when I'm here. How can I be there? And when you're in that state of gratitude, of this peaceful aliveness, you're not in that monkey brain, default mode network. And then you're just really in a state of being. What I feel we have it certainly, very backwards, that people feel like, if they're not feeling love or worthy, they would feel like, all right, well, in order to feel loved and worthy, I need to have lots of money so I
Hmm.
can, go now do, you know, uh, rent out a private charter plane and, go to the most exclusive clubs so that I could finally be worthy and happy in love. And I think as we start to uncover the processes of remembering who we are, it's really starting with being. If you can really put yourself in a state where you can imagine, visualize, and be love, be worthy, you really fast track. Even if you want those things to physically arrive to you, you could really be there first. And then from that space, from that energetic, do the things that inspire you from that space. And I think the things that ultimately you kind of want and desire, they'll come at you much further. So, being, I think, is so important. And to master the skill of being is certainly, I think, something that I'll be doing for a lifetime.
Love it. So great. So this is really what we're talking about so far is really the foundational piece of creating an atmosphere and an environment for health. And then there's the scientifical things. And you mentioned some of them, like we could talk because you are big on longevity and performance, but also you love biohacking. I would love to know, what do you feel is, to kind of just get into that subject right now, what do you feel is the number one thing people are missing in their life that is the ultimate biohack to their health?
So many things, but I would potentially say breath work and breath work techniques. Why
Mm.
is that? Well, I mentioned that it's consciousness, the state that we are in, because when we are most conscious, we're in this gratitude, peaceful aliveness, state of joy, versus when we're in the stress state, that's the ego space, the default mode space that drives inflammation and disease. Well, breath is one of those things. It's connected to our autonomic nervous system. And so we don't have to think about it to breathe. However, most of us, the way we breathe is really just up in the chest. We don't take deep breaths, and we're kind of breathing much faster than we normally would be breathing. That's because the default mode, the ego's on, and that starts the process. However, our diaphragm has innervations both from our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, and both voluntary muscles, or we can voluntarily control it through our phrenic nerve. So that is a way we can now consciously hack our autonomic nervous system by how we breathe. And there's different types, I teach this thing in my courses, but there are different ways of breathing that will bring us calm, bring us energy, bring us clarity. There are even ways of breathing that restrict blood flow to the parts of our brain, which is the default mode network, which actually releases trauma and releases and brings us into states of mental clarity. So breath is one of those things, I think, that it's one of the easiest things that we can do to change our state. And our state is so important because our state dictates what our cells think about what's happening outside the world. So if we want access to more health, more happiness, more of our potential and performance, we have to master the energy that's in our body, our bioenergetic energy, and the breath is the easiest way to tap into that.
Ooh, so good. And I love that you bring up that because number one, it's a free tool that everybody could access today. It's just learning the different methods. Like you said, there's definitely different methods to achieve the result you want. Personally, I like the one that brings me back into, is it parasympathetic calming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Parasympathetic is
I
calming.
always get them mixed up, but I personally like box breathing. It really helps me. I also love doing it outside because then I'm getting more fresh air opposed to like the inside air. But, one person I love right now that talks a lot about this is Gary Brecka. And he talks about like oxygen, when you have oxygen in your body, or when you lack oxygen in your body, that is literally that causes disease. And so the more we oxygenate our cells is really what's going to help prevent disease and other forms of problems like cancer. So great that you mentioned that. I would love to talk about, because we know sleep is one of the hottest topics really today. It is at the top tier of health. If you don't have adequate sleep, then you're basically like throwing everything off. And so I'd love to talk about, since I've covered this a lot of my podcast, the importance of sleep and how to basically set yourself up for better sleep. I would love to ask you another question. Why is circadian rhythm so important?
It drives our entire body. Our circadian
Did I
rhythm
lose
is
you?
basically how we have evolved to understand all the signals of the earth. And so our whole cellular programming is normally programmed to the day and night cycles of the sun. And so, we know that when we get early morning sunlight, it's going to bring in some cortisol. It'll help us wake up. And then certainly when the sun goes down, we'll start to produce melatonin when we sleep. And this circadian rhythm regulates our hormones and how we behave throughout the day, our digestion, everything. And so when you don't sleep well, you wreck that. And when you wreck your circadian rhythm, guess what bumps up? Cortisol comes up in your body. And when you have chronic elevations of cortisol, that leads to adrenal fatigue, that leads to more inflammation, that leads to insulin resistance. So you wreck your entire body by not getting regular good sleep.
It's so good. It's so good. It's so important. And I think there are tools we could use to help track our sleep to see where we're at in quality sleep. Because I think a lot of people think they're sleeping well, but that doesn't mean they're actually getting the quality sleep that is actually restoring. So it's good to like at least know where you're at. And that's where biohacking comes in, where you could use these technologies. Let's talk a little bit about biohacking, because I think first we need to get down to the basics. And you talked about these basics, but is there something that you're loving right now in the biohacking world that you feel is something you share personally with your clients that could be useful to help them in mastering the basics?
In mastering the basics, I think biohacking and longevity medicine, longevity science has a lot to offer. What I want to let people know that you don't have to break into that to actually really tap into human performance and potential. That so much of the basics is all free, but there are some tools, and how do you use them? Well, it really kind of depends on what you're struggling with, and there are basic tools for them. I love a cold plunge. It's a great way, particularly when I know that I'm stressed out, um, and I'm in my head. There's no better way of getting into the body than just shoving your whole body immersed in cold. It will wake you up, and there's a lot of beneficial processes such as the release of endorphins and dopamine, which is the natural painkiller, natural feel-good hormones in your body. It increases your metabolism. It decreases inflammation. So that's a great biohack for that. So much that's out there. I mean, specifically, if people, I don't know if you have one specific one that you'd like to ask about, but there's so much that's out there. And there's a lot that's out there. And one of the things I at least want to talk about as it pertains to the
Yeah.
biohacking space is there is a lot of technology, and for some it's pretty expensive, particularly once you start to get into treatments like whole body stem cell makeovers and things like that. And I just want to let people know that the majority of what's going to keep you healthy, happy, and living your fullest potential is up. It's all on you, and it's completely achievable without any of those things. And yes, it's great to have the science of longevity, but if you're somebody who's like, man, I need the newest gadget, I'm going to rely on this gadget, I'm going to stress myself out if my Aura ring doesn't tell me I'm getting enough sleep, you're doing it wrong,
Right.
right?
Right.
There is a part of our human biology. If we want to perform and live longer because we feel like we're not enough, or that we fear poor performance and dying, that's driving the stress response also. So if you're all constantly chasing those things, you're running through a consciousness and biology that's bringing on more stress. Whereas if you feel like you're something greater, if you feel like, oh my God, I'm a part of something greater, that me, myself, is an individual cell that's working together with you, Erica, who's another cell, who's working with Chase, who introduced us as another cell in this whole organism, that we're all working together. And we want to better ourselves because we want to be the best version of us for this thing. Then you drive a different type of biology that's in your body. So
Yeah.
the biohacking longevity space is great, science, but there's also the art of living and remembering to live a
Mm.
beautiful life, and doing the practices that put you more in the state of you, in gratitude, and that state of peaceful aliveness. That, I believe, is probably the most powerful biohack that we have.
So good. So good. And really that's what, I've been covering as well a lot on my podcast is that the causes of disease are less our genes, it's more our epigenetics. And that is what we have in our environment, what influences our environment, and the lifestyle we live and how we're living it. And it brings me to, I'm actually, after this call, I'm going to celebrate somebody's 80th birthday. And let me just tell you, this 80th birthday man, the way he has so much energy, and it makes me think about all the things you talk about, the 7 energies of how to really live life and to have longevity. He's full of life for an 80-year-old person. And the reason being, he still does his career he loves. So he lives in his purpose. He has a God he worships. So he has that spiritual connection of something bigger than himself. He also has his fitness. He was doing, I forgot how many, he said he was doing over 100 push-ups. And I'm like, what? So he has that dialed in. He has his nutrition awareness, and all these things. And when he went to visit some people back in his hometown that are his same age, night and day difference, 80-year-old person side by side. And that is just a pure example of everything you talked about today. And I just, again, as I'm prepping for this interview, I'm thinking about this because we're about to go celebrate him. And it's like, this is the proof of what it looks like when you're living as your true self and you're aware of these things, you're conscious in how you're living your lifestyle. And it's absolutely beautiful to see and witness it. So brings me to ask you, the other question I was going to ask you, the importance of living in our integrity. I love this. I heard Chase having a conversation with you about this, living in alignment with our truth and our integrity, and how that really will influence our health, because as you said, our cells are always speaking to each other. And so if you could touch on that a little bit, because I think that really is pulling together all the synergy of living as our authentic self.
Yeah. Living in integrity really just means that we get to define who we are. And certainly during times where we are relaxed, during times that we are inspired, we get to define that. Who are we? Who is your I am? Is it joyous? Is it confident? Is it loving? Is it peaceful? It's all these states of being that we could define. Then life is going to throw you curveballs to say, really, are you that? Are you someone that knows how to forgive? I had something like that. As I'm teaching all this personal development stuff 2 years ago, I had a guy I hired to be my CEO that ended up stealing a lot of money from me. So it was the universe going, oh, yeah, did you speak on forgiveness? Do you got this? And honestly, I was able to forgive him pretty quickly. So
Oh,
life
very
is going
nice.
to throw you curveballs in who you say you're going to be. But the more you stick with that, the more you are integrous to who you define yourself to be, no matter what life circumstances, you will be in that energy of you. And that energy of you is the most vibrant, most resonant version of that. It is through the traumas that we have as children, the social conditioning that starts putting up blocks to that authentic frequency. And the more we do things that bring us joy, the more we connect with people, the more we discover what inspires us, all those things that remind us of that energy, and saying yes to those things, no matter how hard it might be, because fear might come in the way. That's being integrous to yourself. And that integrity is going to remind you of who you are. That integrity is going to bring you back to that vibration of you. That is the thrive state. And that is the state where every single cell goes, whoo, we feel alive. That's when all your cells are like, boom, we're here to do something. We're here to do something big. And that's the message you want to send to yourselves, which is why stepping back into you, the authentic version of you, that energetic of you, is like that's the state of optimal health, longevity, and peak performance.
Oh, so good. So good. I felt the energy behind your message today. I think that is a great way to really wrap this episode. Honestly, I love what you just shared. Well, before I ask you my last question, I want to know, you do offer, because not everybody could work with you, unfortunately. But the way people could learn more about you and what you teach today of how they could really live their optimal health and longevity, anti-aging, all the things, what are some ways people could find out more about you and learn more about what you teach today?
Well, thanks so much. I mean, they can follow me on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. My handle, Dr. VMD, DOCTOR VMD. And then I've got a digital library at mythrivestate.com. And I have courses there. I have courses called the Activator, which teaches you how to use breath, movement, laughter, different energetic techniques to shift your energetic state. Because when you learn how to shift your energetic state, you can go to states of calm, states of productivity, and that'll change how you show up in your relationships, in your work, in your business. So that's super important. Then we have a longevity course called the Thrive State Accelerator, where we go through these 7 pillars and ask yourself, what choices are you making in each one of these categories? And how do I actually start to build easy habits to attach each one of these categories so I build a lifestyle that's sustainable for me to have optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And we also have a mental health academy in there where I interview 50 of the world's thought leaders in mental and emotional wellness, including Vishen Lakhiani, Dave Asprey, Bruce Lipton, Mariel Hemingway. So all that's in the digital library. And certainly I want to make sure we honor and give all the listeners a discount. If they use your unique code and use the coupon code ThriveState50, we'll give them 50% off of everything we have back there. And that's mythrivestate.com.
Amazing. And you have a podcast too. We can't forget to mention that, Thrive State. And you could hear that anywhere podcasts are played. So go check that out. Okay. So I want to ask you the last question. And if you were to share a piece of wisdom, a life lesson you've learned along your vast journey, and you just feel you need to shout it out to the world today, what would that piece of wisdom be and why?
Okay. Well, I think just people won't understand why after listening to the previous portion of the podcast, but like, life is a gift. It is such remarkable odds. And I had a incident with the birth of my daughter where we almost lost her. I mean, just how precious life is. And the fact that you are here, you are given this huge gift. And so every moment we get to breathe, it is a gift. So can you see that life is a gift, that each moment you get to learn from that gift? There's going to be some great moments and moments that hurt you, but each moment is there for you to grow and learn. And if you remember just to be you and feel alive and be present to that gift, it's going to gift you with abundant health, with optimal performance, and it will give you the abundant life that you're probably looking for.
Beautiful, beautiful. Dr. Kien Vuu, this has been absolutely remarkable. There's so much wisdom in all you shared today. And I know there's so much more goodness people could learn from you. So of course, everybody, please go follow him and grab one of his courses, gift it to a friend, whatever you need to do. But I think this is really the key to optimal health. And it really comes down to your lifestyle and how you're living it and how you are being authentically you in this lifetime, most importantly. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Erica.